Hi, you're listening to Legend for Real, and this is Armand Djikoloum.
Hello and welcome back to Legends of Read. I'm your host, Joanne Sukumaran, a bossonist from Singapore. Welcome to the show, Armand. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm doing really well, thank you.
Yeah, I know you're currently traveling. You're in Antwerp, right?
Yes, I have some time off now because I still have 2 weeks of holiday before starting the season. So I thought I would visit a friend of mine here who is playing in the orchestra. So yeah.
To begin with, maybe we could find out a little bit about you. Could you tell us how you started playing the oboe?
Yeah, so actually I started very young. So I started when I was, I think, 5 or 6. We had a little musical game with my mom where you should kind of recognize the instruments. And I just really liked the sound of the oboe. I think it's actually quite common because you hear very often that people are drawn to the oboe by just some recording, some sound, or because it's just so specific. And then we went to the Conservatoire of my city. Luckily enough, there was some space and I could start straight away, which was really what I wanted. I didn't want to do some kind of transition year or something before starting. And yeah, so, and I just, yeah, started with an oboe that was back then almost as big as me, but
Oh, okay. Wow, yeah, that's. Do you come from a musical family? Or
no, not at all. I tried to put my mom a bit afterwards to play. So at some point, she played a bit of viola. But yeah, no, I mean, no one in my family is musician. But my mom really liked music. There was always music on when I was a child.
Hmm. Okay. So when did you decide to take this seriously and become a professional musician then?
Yeah, it's quite funny. I think somehow it was always kind of there. I think I always wanted to do a profession which would be a bit out of the ordinary. For example, at some point, I wanted to be a clown, and I also even wanted to work in a circus. And so when I was little, I was actually conducting in front of speakers, like in Swan Lake or something like this, and I was conducting. So I remember, I think actually already when I was 7 or 8, I was saying to my mom, I want to be a conductor. And then with the time, I just realized that this was not for me, especially because I was really not the best at everything that was regarding theory. And so then after, I just realized that I just really like to play concerts. And I really also, yeah, I mean, just to be around other people playing and also a little bit of traveling as well. And it's almost as if it was always there. There was not a conscious decision where I thought at 16, okay, I really want to do this. I think it was always there in the background, like since I basically started.
Did you have some musical inspirations? Who were some of them when you started out?
Yeah, I mean, of course, like my first inspiration is always, I think, like it was my first teacher. He's a very good teacher. He had lots of people that became professionals. And so this was the first one. But then after we had other CDs from Heinz Holliger, for example, and Eric Speller also that recorded a lot of CDs as well. So I was just listening mostly to all the Heinz Holliger CDs because he also recorded so much. There was a lot to listen to. And then after I became really a fan of piano and violin, but mostly from the past. So for example, Michelangelo or Richter for the piano or for violin, Kogan, Oistra, etc. So yeah, so those
Mm.
were like the two big periods. And in general, I also was very inspired by people who are playing around me. This is also the main thing. For example, when we are doing recording, you just listen to someone next to you and say, oh, wow, that's really nice. And it also drives you
Uh-huh.
to
Okay.
try to
I
be
see.
yourself a bit better.
So the ecosystem around you. Yeah, I recently found out about the new CD where you have the Zelenka trio sonatas and Ghost, right?
Yeah.
You recorded with some of your friends. I thought it was a very fine recording. Could you tell us the process leading up to this recording?
Yeah, so I mean, the idea was that the Zelenka, they were rediscovered actually quite late, but there hadn't been so many recordings of whole sonatas, for example, since Burg and Holliger. So you had another one, which is great with Dominic Vollenberber and William Peverka, but there were not so many. And we thought that we could try to do something on our own. At first, it was just an idea somehow, and it's often the case with city projects. You have this great idea at the moment, and then it will come to realization, and then you also have a few missteps, especially because Theo is working in Germany and he's quite busy, trying to balance the job in the orchestra, and he also has a big solo career and in the music.
Okay.
And Olivier also in NSO, and I'm also traveling all the time between Dresden and London. And so it came to the point where we thought, how can we actually make it work? And then it somehow really came good together. We had big blocks of working where we all stayed in London, and we just played and played, and everyone was exchanging ideas. But also, like, outside of the more project out, there was always the idea that what could be great would be to add something to the recording. Olivier had this really great idea to add Tony Ako, who is a composer. At the beginning, we were not exactly sure in which form it would go, because, for example, Olivier did the recording of Mozart with the LSO, where Tonya wrote the cadence. And so there is an alternative Mozart cadence version, which is quite contemporary, and actually it's really cool. You should listen to it if you have the time. But in the beginning, there was this idea that this would be the ghost of Zelenka. This is based on Zelenka vocal music. We start from those like Zelenka chords, and then it fits to a more modern approach. And I think it creates this very nice transition in between the sonatas, where you can just listen to the whole CD in one go, just one concept, and not necessarily, okay, this is Sonata 1, and now it's Sonata 2 and 3 and 4 and 5.
Yeah.
I have to say, myself also, when I try to do recitals, I always try to think about how it's actually mixing together, and not just, I want to play this bit. And I think it creates like quite a nice continuity in between all the sonatas. And so the whole idea is to have an album, and especially like nowadays, where everyone is on Spotify, and it's quite common that you just listen to one tracks or two tracks or three tracks. But it happened less than before, where you just put the whole CD and just listen to it. And the idea is that with this continuum and transition in between the pieces, is that it's a double album that goes together, and that you can just listen to the end and have very nice and interesting concept in between.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really like the Tonya core, but now with your explanation, it makes even more sense, I think, because I was listening on Spotify, and then, if you actually had the album CD in front of you, you can read the whole concept, right, normally. So, yeah, I think it's cool because we don't have the luxury of time. I mean, in the pandemic, people were listening to entire albums, but now people just listen to singles, right? Yeah. Okay. So the challenge you said was getting everybody in one place at one time, right?
Yes, okay.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. So do you intend to perform that live also with them, or in the near future?
I think all of this is in discussion. It's always the same with agenda and how we can make things out, but I'm sure that there will be something planned in the future, but I cannot announce anything yet.
Okay. So I know that outside of music, that you are quite an avid runner, right? You take part in a lot of races, right? Yeah. How did that start? How did you get started in running?
So actually, when I started running, it was actually not for the running itself. It was because I was planning to do a competition in Japan, Oboe competition. And so, there is this challenge, like if you travel so much, like from Europe to Japan, and then you have to perform, maybe you draw number 1, and then you have to play 2 days after, and you have to fight jet lag, you have to fight the stress, etc. And so with my teacher back then, he was a very big fan of doing sports in order to fight tiredness. So I was just basically jogging with him. I think it was 6 or 7 in the morning sometimes. And it really helped me in this competition, because I was also playing in the orchestra in another back then. So it was a lot to juggle with. It started like this. And then after a few years, especially in the pandemic, I started to do it again, but then I started to do it again because I actually enjoyed it. And then I started to train and then get better at something. You want to do it more and more. And then so I started to do some races and yeah, now I mean, you could say that I'm training quite a bit, but I always try to make it work within my life. But yeah, sometimes it also takes quite a few sacrifices.
Do you run every day or just 3 to 4 times a week?
No, I run every day twice.
No, but 2 times.
So yeah, so usually I run like when I get up, like at 6 or 5:30 or something like this, and then I start my day, and then I run again on the evening. So it it's not always easy to do, but for example, if you are or like when I was in Dresden last year, then what I would do is I would try to do a workout in the morning and then go from there to the orchestra, like to the orchestra building to Oper, and then shower, eat breakfast there, and start my day. And then on the evening after the concert, I would run back home. So to try to mix a bit this kind of stuff because otherwise it takes too much time. But
I see. So also you run home after the concert. Okay.
yeah, or sometimes in
Okay.
between. Like, for example, we played 2 magic flutes, like one at 2 and one at 7. Then I have like an hour and a half and I'm not doing anything. So I would just run in between and come back and play the second concert.
Wow. It's a commitment. Yeah. I guess, yeah. I was reading the book, the 5 a.m. Club by Robin Sharma. Have you heard of it?
No, I have heard about it. I have heard about it, but I haven't read that. No, but I know the idea behind it.
Yeah.
But I think that with this, it's also a tiny bit of a danger. I mean, I haven't read it, but from what someone told me, I think because the whole idea of the book, I guess, is that lots of people that are juggling through a lot of stuff are getting up really early or something like this, right?
Yeah, the wake up at 5, yeah.
I think it's also important to listen to your body because everyone has a very different circadian rhythm, which is like how your own body is regulating itself. And so you have some people that are naturally just getting up later and being more productive later and staying also up later at night. If you try to force both people to get into this 5 a.m. routine, sometimes it creates a lot of stress because this is not, for me, it worked well because I'm just someone that is always going to wake up really early, but I can also sleep very early as well. I mean, unfortunately, with a musician, not always so easy. But like, it doesn't go against what my body would naturally do. And because I think, it's easy also to fall into a thing where, everyone has to get up at 5 and do like 1 hour yoga and then run. But the truth is that depending on how your own body is, sometimes it's just not the best thing to do. So
I was doing it for a period of time, but nowadays I stopped at 5 a.m. It's more like 7 a.m. I think.
but that also still quite bad.
So yeah, I know because recently we were emailing, I think during the summer, and I was like telling you that I had to postpone the interview because I had some injuries, and then I was quite surprised that you wrote back and you said that you were going through the same thing.
Yeah. So I mean, it was quite difficult because actually I had never faced with running, yes, but with Oboe, not really. And because I was trying to do too many things at the same time and also with quite a lot of stress as well. And I started to get really like a tendonitis or something like overuse of a tendon.
Yeah.
And the thing is, actually, I was not sure what to do. Like I was just, because I'm always someone who is trying to push through things, like in my day life, and it's fine. Even if I say 3 hours, I will still play this concert. And even if it's last minute, I will do this because you always think that you can always do everything, and you try to think yourself as some kind of Superman, And I tried to push for it, and it just got so much worse. And then at some point, I was like, I can't play anymore. This is, I think, the first time in my life that I had to cancel something. And it was quite difficult because I hate to have a feeling that I'm letting someone down. I think it's often the case as musicians, there is this relation that you have with other musicians and you just want to be there for them. At some point, it's very difficult to see the line where you might really endanger yourself and where you can accommodate yourself with some kind of pain to just make it work. And yeah, so this was quite difficult. I went to Holland to get treated because definitely I had the name of the therapist that was there. And so this was really good. And I think to have a little bit less of a hectic schedule also helps, because you build a lot of tiredness over the years, over the months, especially when you don't take the summer break, for example. It really made me reflect a bit on having more respect for my body and taking more pauses and to listen to myself more. And so it was a very hard time, but it was also very instructive.
For me, likewise, I was going for physiotherapy, and at first I wasn't sure what was going on. So they were doing the shockwave therapy, and it was so painful. And so I changed to a different therapist, and then we stopped the shockwave. And then, but he told me that, you have to think of yourself like an athlete, you are a professional musician. But basically, you are doing the same work like an athlete. So you really have to respect your body, right?
Yeah, because in the end, it's like a performance, like you're performing and you have some tension or stress and you have to play, I don't know, like sometimes in orchestra, you're solo 20 seconds, but for 20 seconds, they mean so much to you. And yeah, if you're in a recital, that's a bit longer, of course. And you also have to prepare your body to get this stress and also to be tired, especially because music is one of the professions where if you want to, you can work all the time. And you can work on Sundays, you can work all the time, and you can work in so many different places. And so that means that like you're going a bit into some like hyperactive mode. And I think it's important to know that, like, of course, like this might lead to some danger at some point, and it's important to listen to yourself and not to do things automatically, because it makes you look more successful to just be playing all the time everywhere, like in the world.
Yeah, and I think that in our classical music, we have this thing called the 100 days of practice, what was by Hilary Hunt, right? And I used to do these kind of things. I always push myself, and then I start to think, do you really need to work 24 hours? Do you need to work on Sunday, right? So I think
one thing that really helped me is to think like, because I mean, of course, when you're a musician, you have this drive for excellence and you want to be the best that you can be. But I think what really helped me was to think, wherever how can I say, if I really can see why I'm doing this, for example, instead of doing just adding things to the calendar automatically. Because, for example, if you are just practicing for this and practicing for this and this, and then you're not really quite completely sure about like why you're actually doing it, because you want to play this piece, because you want to be able to do this specific challenge, I don't know, thing by art or this kind of stuff, to really have a reason of why you're practicing. And I think it's okay to can make sacrifices, but what becomes very hard is when you're just trying to survive through things, which is unfortunately, it's a bit more common than what we think. Because you're just trying to navigate your way through all those programs, and then when something goes wrong with transport, then you have no time to practice, and it just becomes like very stressful. So there was this, and another thing is also I try now to always have some kind of one day like off. Doesn't mean that I'm not practicing in that day, but after projects. Because what is very hard on your body is to go directly from one thing to another, especially if you travel on the day, for example, and because it creates this kind of continuum of stress and travel. And even if we don't think about it as it, but travel is still takes a lot, on your body. You take the plane, you wait, like I don't know, the air quality is not so good, for example, in the plane. So like sometimes you tend to get sick. And I think it's important to try to take one day off after each project in order just to be able to.
Yeah. I was reading this book. It was called Rebound. And then they actually have a workbook. And some of the things that were quite interesting is like giving yourself the grace, that, if since you train so hard, but now you have to make recovery your sport, that you try
Yeah.
to recover as strong as you train,
Because, for example, in sport,
Yeah.
you are actually forced to do the recovery. Because, for
Yeah.
example, if I'm running a marathon in 6 weeks or
Yeah.
something, then after
Yeah.
I have to recover because I just can't do otherwise. But
Yeah.
with things like music or activities that are dominantly a bit more intellectual, then it's hard sometimes to see it because we think we are not actually doing so much effort, but actually we are. And first with all your muscles and the posture, this is quite important. And then also just on a mental kind of effort, because if you are being invested, then you're focused and you're also a bit stressed. And you also need to be able to just reset for one day to then think, I'm really looking forward to be able to do this next project, and not just being like, okay, I just finished this now. Okay, now I have to move on to this and not have the time to reset, because then I think at some point it can be like quite hard.
Yeah, I think in sports, it's like quite, when you see someone like, for example, like Nadal, he announced like he's injured, then he has to withdraw. But musicians announcing this is not a common thing, I think.
Yeah, because there is a
Yeah.
bit this
Yeah.
this shame,
Like a
shame that
yeah. Yeah, I also you play a lot of chamber music. So how do you try to keep going? How do you search for positive environment? So, sometimes we don't get to choose the environment we work in, right? Yeah.
I mean, I think the first thing about this is actually, and it's quite hard to say, but you have to be lucky. I was really lucky to have been contacted really a while back. It was, I think, in the pandemic time by people from Kaleidoscope Collective. And then, so I joined them. And so we actually, it's quite a funny story. So it was in the middle of the pandemic, and we were supposed to do a concert at Wigmore in order to kind of reopen a bit, like the musical life, like to say, yeah, now it's fine to go to concerts again. I was pretty nervous because when you haven't performed for 6, 7 months or something, like to jumping into something like that, it's quite scary.
Yeah.
And I remember arriving there and everyone being just so nice and so positive. And I realized, actually, like this actually allows me to play better and to try harder, because I just want to be able to, match them and have a nice time with them. And I didn't have this kind of negativity environment. And this was really great. And yeah, funnily enough, the concert was canceled last minute and we actually played in Wigmore. But without an audience, with just streaming, and everyone put like teddy bears in the hall. So it was like, yeah, really great. But, and so yeah, afterwards, like, I kept playing with them. And I think what's really nice in this environment is that everyone is allowed to be vulnerable. For example, everyone, like, not everyone is trying to be like, this character of being like, yeah, no, it's stressed. If someone is feeling like, oh, like, I'm actually pretty stressed about this concert, then it's okay to say it. And it makes such a huge difference, because it doesn't make you weak or anything. It's just like, you're just acknowledging something that you're actually feeling. Also, if someone is not happy with the way that they performed, everyone is always very supportive. It just creates a general rehearsal and concert environment where you're just looking forward to come back to it. And you don't go there being stressed, thinking like, it's going to be hard. You're just going and enjoying playing, and actually it makes you play better because you're not so tense. And I think it's easier to do with a smaller scale of people because you don't have to deal with like too many like personality different, etc. Like this is harder to do in an orchestra, for example. Yeah, I think it's important to try to be more positive in general, also because it just generates better results.
I know you balance a different portfolio, right? You play in orchestra, you do chamber, and you also do solo work, right?
Yeah. So I guess in orchestras. So, for example, quite often in Staatskapelle Dresden, which is also what I'm doing here as well. And so I'm kind of usually doing all my things in one block. So to say like 10 days, so I just spend my whole life in the opera and I'm picked up thing, yes. Okay. And so I'm doing like 10 to 12 days of this. And then usually I would go to England for 10 to 12 days. And in England, it can depend a bit. So sometimes it would be chamber music. And then I try to also add some recitals next to it. And also sometimes master classes. So like this is a bit, I try to balance this. And then I try to have a few days off in order to, see the people I love and also to, recover a bit from over travel.
What are some of your upcoming plans? You have some recitals coming up, right?
Yeah, so I'm going to start my season again in the second week of October, starting with Kaleidoscope. I'm going to play a Mozart quartet and also Schumann romances in YCAT. So this is going to be very nice. But then afterwards, like a bit later, so in November, I'm going to do, so between end of November to December, I'm going to play a few recitals in Scotland, starting with a masterclass in Glasgow. Just travel around Scotland with YCAT with the pianists that I've played now. We have been playing together for, I think, 2 years. And yeah, so it's going to be really nice. I'm really looking forward to do this. Also because Scotland is also, it's just so beautiful. Like when you're doing concerts there and then you're just, running a bit also. No, it's gonna be really great. And I think we also have like a nice program, like a bit of like a different program than usual. And it's gonna be very nice.
Okay. We have some great running routes here in Singapore, but it's very hot.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, I transited 2 times, but just through the airport because you cannot go outside of the airport if you don't have a visa. But I transited, I remember, on my way to Australia this year and 2 years ago, and I remember arriving, and I was coming from Germany, like German winter, with all my clothes, and also in the planes, it's also pretty cold. I remember arriving and just starting to do, like this. Hey.
How has your experience been like to present the oboe as a solo instrument? Was it hard? Do you face some challenges?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely hard, especially because just it's not very common. When your instrument is not often exposed, then when you're doing it, you feel that you have to really present something good. Otherwise, what people, they will never want to hear or recital again. And I mean, with oboe, what's hard is that it's just by essence a bit like horn. It's just like such a physical instrument. And I think it's probably the only kind of instrument where if you go to listen, even some bachelor exams or master exams or something like this, or even international competitions, you see so many people that they're just struggling to even get through the thing. And it's not something that you see with parody, where you feel that they just could play for 5 hours.
Forever and ever.
So first, there is, of course, like a very physical element to be able to deliver like a 1 hour, 1 hour 10 recital and playing all the time. Yeah, so for this, like running has really helped me because, I mean, running doesn't make you play oboe better. Otherwise, that would be the best. But it helps you to trust your own body and to trust your ability to start for something from the beginning to finish, and which is something very important because there are times in recitals when it's not so easy, and then just having the knowledge that you can do it. I mean, you should just run like, I don't know, 20K, like you're just saying 1 hour of a pool, like it should kind of work, right? And so this really helped me. And then also outside of the physical aspect, what is not always so easy is to be able to present a repertoire that is not always the same. Because it's always a very fine mix between presenting things that people that don't know the oboe are going to want to see. For example, if they say, oh, Schumann romances, oh, nice, Schumann. But then also to try to not always play the same things. So that's the second challenge. So yeah, I would say first the physical and being able to handle it. The second is the repertoire. But I would say that, yeah, a lot of it is also very mental. Because if you have played so many recitals, even the day where you have just traveled and then your read is not so good because you just arrived in a complete different climate, if you know that you have done this 10 times and 10 times this program, it's always going to work. And usually what's hard is the first time when you're doing like a new program, because you don't have this confidence, basically. And what's pretty funny is, if I try to compare this, for example, with running, is like often you see people, they are trying, for example, to break 18 minutes in the 5K or 20 minutes or whatever. And then usually they always get stuck on 20 or 1 and they just can't get under it. Yeah. And at this time, the challenge is not physical, it's actually more mental. And you see that usually when most people have finally gotten under that, like 1959 or whatever, then they always manage to do it. And I think with the physical difficulty, it's a bit the same. Is if you haven't done it and if you don't have the knowledge that you have done it and that it went well, then it's really more stressing and more difficult. And so, yeah, I mean, I would say that, again, people just need to try to play the most they can, like to try to play the most recitals they can, even for their families, for their friends, etc. Just to know, to have this inner knowledge, like, I have done it before, it's going to be okay.
So you think that it's more like a mental game?
Yeah, I mean, there is a physical part, but often it's like this moment of doubts when you're playing and you think, am I going to get through this? And if you know that you have done it so many times, then this question usually you just forget about it like very fast.
Okay, so you find that you can train this through sports, right? This mental toughness. Yeah.
I think it helps. I mean, it's not only one way, but I find that this definitely helps. And I remember discussing it a lot with Philip Stone back then. And I think he's also like pretty much on this idea that trusting your own body in general just helps you to also trust it when you have to perform as well.
Yeah, the funny thing was when I arrived in the hotel in Bangkok, and then in the morning I walked into the gym and he was the first person I saw before the IDRS, and then I was talking to him. I said, "Oh, I'm nervous." Then he like, "No, don't be nervous. You'll be fine." And he was working out already in the morning. Yeah, it's a quite funny experience. Yeah. So what do you like to do for fun? I mean, besides war and all that.
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, it's already quite time consuming. I have to say, it's hard to get so many hobbies. The thing that I really love, I would say there are probably two things that I can always do and that make me really happy, is to eat. I just love to eat anything sweet. Like I have a sweet tooth, I have a salt tooth. I can just eat like anything. And so I love to eat. I also love to nap. Napping for me is it's just so great. There's nothing better for me than just napping in the afternoon, but unfortunately I cannot really do it. Now it's actually a bit easier now that I've gone a bit lighter on the schedule. For example, if I'm in London, then I would usually try to see some art exhibitions there, because I also used to do this a lot when I was outside. So mostly paintings, etc. at the Royal Galleries. But yeah, so mostly reading and just going to exhibitions when I can. But I mean, unfortunately, more than this is not so easy because if you try to balance the professional life and trying to do everything that helps maintain this professional life, then you just try to spend the most time possible with the people that you love and your friends, etc. And I mean, that's basically it. But I would say probably eating comes in the first part. Yeah, I'm a terrible cook, but I love to eat.
Okay. Yeah. So, I like to visit art galleries too. Yeah. I find it quite inspiring.
Because especially if you are in a different part of the world. Because,
exactly.
like, for example, and then you're just there and you think like, oh, actually, there's this really nice museum that you can go to. And this makes you a bit cooler inside, because sometimes you travel a lot and then ultimately you don't see the point of all this travel because you just go from one place to another, and then at the end you haven't seen anything.
Okay. So I think that we talked about this before we started recording. What do you think is the most misunderstood thing of being a classical musician? Dealing with the social media and all this,
Yeah, I think that what is very hard is that like social media, it does add a lot of pressure to, especially like with younger musicians, like when you don't have yet like a bigger career, etc. And also if you are at a time in your career where you're a bit unhappy, either because like things are not going your way with auditions or inquiries or something like this, and then having to be always facing this idea that everyone is super happy, that everyone is doing like great concerts all the time, and that they always play perfect, and that it's amazing, and that the nature around is amazing. And I think that's a bit hard to face, to be able to face this every day when, for example, maybe you played a concert and it was actually not as good as what you had hoped. And then you just think, but how are these people managing to, play perfect every time and enjoying it every time?
Yeah.
So I think it's good to take a bit of a step down with this.
Like distance, yeah.
Yeah, a bit of distance. And especially at times where you either have to focus on yourself or when you're like at a harder part. So for example, when I was injured, I completely stopped going on social media for weeks. I found it great because I could focus on recovering and not thinking everyone is practicing and playing, and then it mess up the recovery process.
Yeah.
And this is something that you actually hear a lot of athletes saying. Athletes in the Olympics, they also say, yeah, we are turning off social media because it creates this environment that is not helping you to deliver at your best. But also what is a bit different from athletes is that you have to connect with your audience also as a artist, and that it's a very fine line between connecting with people and then doing things which are not in your best interest, like either for, I don't know, your mental health or your physical health, etc. And yeah, it's a line that everyone has to find because it's very individual. For example, I try to do mostly like social media stuff like in the evening, like when I have done everything I needed to do through the day so that it doesn't like interact with it. Everyone has probably like a different routine, but I think it's important to use it as a way to connect with people, but not to take it so close to you, basically.
Yeah, because it's ironic because you have to produce the work and the work can only be done through deep focus work, right? Away from distractions. Yeah. But then after that, you have to promote it. You have to bring it on tour. Then you also have to be on social media. So it requires both sides of the coin.
Yeah, because also it's very hard because as a musician, you have to be focused so much. You have to be able to stay focused for, I don't know, 1 hour if you're playing a recital or 3 hours or something if you play an opera.
Yeah.
And then next to it, there is something that is actually distracting your attention. So yeah, I mean, it's a very fine line and everyone has like different psyches and way of being, but I think it's important to try to detach a bit yourself from this. And especially, for example, in times where you feel that this is not going to bring you so much happiness.
Yeah. I think my mentor will say, it's not going to book your gigs, right? How much time you spend on social media. Yeah, it's been great talking to you, Armand. Do you have any final words, maybe of encouragement to musicians listening in?
I mean, I think that what's very hard is always to be comparing yourself to other people. And like you often hear it is like people, but you're doing this and it's great, etc. But I think what's important is to listen to yourself and to really trust in what you're doing because eventually it's going to work. If you really believe and if you really keep going through what you believe in, then it's going to work. For example, I remember that one time I went to a competition and it didn't work out at all. And actually, there was someone in the panel, Nick Daniels, that helped me a lot just from listening to me playing. And so sometimes there are so many situations where you're doing something and then the outcome is not exactly what you wanted, but somehow because you played in the way that you actually wanted, then maybe someone is going to touch base, and someone is going to be touched by it, and then it's going to help you out. And so I think it's just important to stay true to yourself, because it's such the most convincing that you're ever going to be, is to be yourself and to really believe why you're doing this, and to try to be the best version that you can be and that you want to be. Yeah, exactly. And not to try to be like everyone else if you don't feel that this is you, basically.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you so much. And it was a pleasure. I also listened to some of the other episodes back then. And it's actually great I like the podcast format for musicians, because I think it's really underused. Because like for sports, so everyone has like so many podcasts, and for classical music, we need more of this. So yeah, thank you so much.